Hello, and I'm delighted to introduce Nick Bottini. Nick is a mindset coach and is helping musicians to overcome all kinds of things. Nick, welcome.
Hi, nice to
Hi.
be here, Julia.
Look, fantastic to have you here. There's so many amazing topics you cover, I know, with musicians and, of course, with pianists and everyone, really. So let's start with most, I think. I think we will talk today about a lot of things: confidence, nerves, motivation, competitiveness, and really many, many other things.
Right.
So tell me a little bit, if we start from the beginning, how did you get into this? How did you become a mindset coach? It's quite a job.
It's quite a job, and the truth is that my own journey as a music student was in some ways, I guess, trickier than some of my colleagues. You know, I was trained as a violinist first of all, and went through university and music college, and got to the end of my training having felt a bit battered and bruised, sort of psychologically, by the whole experience, and so decided to go into to teaching and mentoring young people. You know, and I worked with a few people to sort of help them to get into the professional arena. But one of the things that really held me back as a violinist when I was studying was that I had a shoulder injury problem, and by the time I'd got to the end of my training, I had convinced myself, or I had accumulated a load of beliefs through the system and through my own conclusions that I wasn't sort of good enough, or I wasn't able to do certain things, and it sort of was sort of I don't know, like restricting or kind of making my own experience of making music much smaller. And I'm sure that anyone listening to this will be aware of the fact that, you know, there's not just the outer component to music making, there's also the inner component. And I had spent a lot of my time, and, you know, at my teacher's suggestion, sort of focusing on the outer stuff. And sort of midway through the final year of my studies, I'd started to get interested in the psychological side of music making, and I'd started to read stuff, and I'd started to investigate, and I tried to experiment with some of the techniques that I'd heard of, like visualization and sort of you know, sort of imagining myself being successful. And some of the time that stuff would work, and I'd feel really pumped up and really you know, proud of myself and capable. And then I'd notice that sometimes it would fizzle out, and I wouldn't quite be able to maintain it. Or I'd try breathing exercise to try and make myself feel confident before a performance, and I'd find myself getting sort of more nervous because the breathing technique didn't seem to be working. And so I was after having initially got quite excited by the idea of exploring the internal world of music, I then started to get a bit disillusioned with the whole realm, because there seemed to be so many different people in the world of sort of performance psychology saying so many different things, and some people swearing by techniques and sort of mind control stuff and sort of reframing and rethinking. Um, and it didn't really seem to be sort of helping me. And whilst I was developing, you know, I was successful as a music teacher and was helping a lot of people that I was mentoring and teaching. But it was whilst I was in the middle of that career that I then discovered a completely different approach to the inner play of music. And it didn't involve techniques. It didn't involve having to do anything to my mindset. It involved removing confusion and removing contamination and removing unnecessary thinking, so that I could kind of return to a more like childlike place, a more freer place. It's a bit like kind of like almost like Alexander technique for the mind, where it's sort of subtractive rather than additive, you know. And after having read so many other things and explored so many other techniques and what have you, this was like a revelation to me, and it was what I was looking for. And I was very inspired by this, and I thought, oh, there must be other people sharing this in the world of music. And it turned out there was almost no one on planet Earth sharing this particular understanding with musicians. And so then I wrote a book and began to sort of bang the drum for this understanding, among musicians, and that's sort of how I've ended up doing that. That's been sort of last 5 or 6 years that I've been sort of actively saying this is something that people need to be listening to and exploring.
Sure, but look, it's really a journey, and so let's talk about confidence. Yeah, let's talk
Mm.
about this moment when you have a performance, let's say, and you're nervous about it. But is it good to be confident, and is it good to come literally saying I'm so cool, I'm really the star, or is it actually better to have some nerves? Because I have been interviewing quite a few people,
Mm.
and what they all said, that all their concerts, when they have been just literally relaxed and cool and like almost sitting on the sofa, they have not been the best concerts.
Mm. I love the way that you asked the question. You know, is it good to be confident? And I think that's a really a good way of thinking about it, because if if we put music to one side for a minute and we talked about anything else, say we talked about brushing our teeth, right? Do I need to be confident in order to brush my teeth? Everyone will go, of course you don't need to be confident to brush your teeth. You just go and brush your teeth, and toothbrushing happens. And if you're in a bad mood, you can still brush your teeth. And we have a degree of understanding that it's not essential to be in a particular state of mind to perform toothbrushing, right? Now, when it comes to music, when we're very heavily invested and we spent decades of our life and we call ourselves, I'm not just someone who does music, I am a musician, right? And it's our identity, right? And it's not the same with toothbrushing. I'm not a toothbrusher. It's just it's something that we happen to do. We know that about toothbrushing, but we're so invested in music that we get the idea that in order to be a good musician, we should be a confident musician because we've somehow seen our idol be confident. And we don't really know what their experience, if I, as a violinist, watch a performance of Vengerov or Heifetz on TV or whatever, I don't really know what their internal experience is like. I'm just guessing. So, but then from that guess, I then think I'm meant to be confident. And the truth is, as far as I can tell with the people that I've spoken to, whatever the level that they're performing at, everybody's experience ebbs and flows moment to moment. And so you will find times where you don't think about being confident quite so much. And there'll be times where you think a lot more about, how am I coming across and am I standing the right way? And there'll be a lot more sort of thinking going on. But what I tell people is that your performance is not at the mercy of your internal weather. It's possible to feel insecure or feel unconfident and go out and perform, and for the audience to love the experience and for you to not enjoy it. It's possible for that to happen. And equally, it's possible for you to feel really confident and like you're doing everything really wonderfully, and for the audience to not really get it because there's it's an interactive, it's a kind of it's a dynamic. It's not just I do confidence and the audience automatically feels that it's so subjective that we end up thinking we have more control over it than we actually do. And so I don't say that, although people ask me about confidence and there are certain logistical things that you can do to sort of prepare yourself musically, and that's a sort of confidence. But beyond, assuming that you've done the prep and you know how to practice effectively enough to be able to have that technique there and have that repertoire there and have it in your memory or what have you, then if we're talking purely about the emotional space that you're in, then the more that a performer feels okay in any state of mind, the more that other people will say they're confident. So the more they can tolerate not feeling confident, the more confident, ironically, they'll feel, if that makes sense.
No, sure. And also in your book, amazing book, Just Playing, you talk about a lot about, of course, the nerves and the psychology before getting on the stage. So could you share with us a couple of sort of mindsets that you have been dealing with that are problematic mindsets, and maybe some tips how can someone work on those, because I must tell my mindset when I'm due to perform is quite awful, and sometimes something works for me, sometimes that something doesn't, and I just accept it. But clearly you are a specialist, so what are the types of the kind of most troubling thoughts, if we can categorize them maybe?
Hmm.
And maybe what are the tips? So I think it's quite a long answer. So yeah, go for it.
Hmm. I guess there's sort of two ways to answer that, I suppose. That you know, in terms of troubling thoughts, if we're talking about performance anxiety or sort of feeling comfortable on a stage, you know, I recently worked with someone who came to me, you know, very high profile performer who came to me because there was difficulty, just increasingly kind of thinky on stage, sort of constantly thinking about how he was sitting and how he was holding the instrument and how he was playing, and that to him, from his perspective, when he started working with me, was very troubling, you know. And you know, the reason I say there's two sort of ways to look at it is because part of the journey, I was, you know, the journey that he went on was to realize that, you know, somewhere along the line he'd got a belief that he was meant to be in a particular state of mind when he was on the stage, and that belief was so ingrained that it was obvious to him that if he felt insecure or nervous or kind of like his head was spinning and sort of very focused on trying to find the perfect position, if all that stuff was going on, then he took it as a sign that something was wrong. And what we looked at was that misunderstanding was that even if he had that kind of thinking, he was still okay. You know, he could have a busy mind and still be okay. He did, because what people tend to do is they have a feeling, essentially, and because they have a belief that that feeling should be different, it makes sense to them from that misunderstanding, that false belief. It makes sense to them to try and intervene, to try and change that feeling, when in fact they don't need. There's nothing about the feeling itself that requires them to change their feeling. And so part of it is, it seems counterintuitive, you know, to say to someone that actually there's no such thing as an unhealthy thought or an unwelcome thought or an unwelcome feeling. That seems counterintuitive, because it's like, well, I want to feel confident, I want to feel peaceful, I want to feel, you know, X, Y, or Z. And of course, you know, when we're doing that fighting, it also, you know, we notice physiological you know, kind of consequences, but they're symptoms rather than causes, you know. So if we're in the habit over many years or many months, what have you, of having an unpleasant feeling and then trying to do something to change it, then because the body and mind are all one system, it shows up, you know, and that's why we get the shakes, or we start to hyperventilate. And there's a whole bunch of things that people do that can be useful if you're experiencing sort of breathing and problems or sort of shaking stuff. There's a few things that you can do kind of at a physiological level that are kind of a bit like sticking plasters that will help to be able to get through it. But fundamentally, but at the very sort of bottom of the issue is this idea that we need to fight our psychological experience. And you know, this misunderstanding is everywhere, by the way. It's not just you know, among musicians who don't know anything about this stuff. You hear psychologists talking about this kind of thing. You know, like we're going to need to reframe our thinking, or we need to think in a better way, or we have to do a certain kind of visualization. But you notice that different, you know, certain schools of thought say that you know, you need to change your thinking, but my experience has been that when I stopped trying to change stuff and didn't give myself an extra set of tasks to do mentally, then it was going back to the kind of psychological space that I was trying to get back to, which is just simplicity. It's just, that's why I called the book Just Play. It's no play plus worry or play plus be confident. It's just do the thing, and however the weather shows up, psychologically, it's okay. And bizarrely, once you sort of get used to letting your psychology be, it does, like coming on this call, for example, actually, beforehand I said to my wife, oh, I'm a bit nervous, and I should know better than that, but actually it's okay. It's normal to feel nervous at times. But what I didn't do was then sort of do a load of breathing techniques and try and visualize my way out of it. I just sort of it came and it went, and and even in the course of this conversation, I sort of sometimes feel a bit more nervous or a bit less nervous, but it's okay, because that's what human beings do. So I don't need to pretend, or I don't need to say to clients that they should be confident, or that a particular thought isn't allowed. And that's because that's such an ingrained belief in society. That's why I spend a lot of my time pointing people in the opposite direction, not fighting our experience, but allowing the experience to be how it is. And that, then we're kind of an open channel to express and to feel and to be, have the kind of spiritual experience that we are, as we are musicians. That feels, as far as I can tell, it's the most effective way, because we're subtracting the unnecessary thinking rather than adding more thinking into a thinking-based problem.
It's almost like, when you can't sleep, you say, oh, I need to sleep. Oh, I can't sleep. And I'm winding myself up. And I'm literally like, I can't do it. And I'm a failure. And basically, but I need to. So it's coming at all. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. I certainly would try it. So you're saying that you need to kind of allow these thoughts to come and don't kind of pay much attention to them, and just try to concentrate on what you're about to do. But that's what I find sometimes very difficult, and maybe you can share something that helped you or your client, whatever. So there are some moments where your mind just really can't really concentrate on the, let's say, piece, and it goes, okay, what's the next note? Like blank, and of course, we don't memorize it by notes. We kind of memorize it by music, or you're just really, the hands are shaking so much that you can't do like a piano. I have experienced this a couple of times, and of course you just are angry with yourself, and B, you just, I get angry. I just say, stop it. And of course, I mean, essentially it gets down. Actually, it is interesting. The longer the program, the better you feel, at least myself. But the first piece is almost inevitably like some kind of thing. So any tips?
So you're asking specifically about like when you're on stage?
Yes. Now a specific question. Yes.
Yeah. See, the thing is, in some ways, you're not going to like this answer. In some ways, by the time you're on stage, it's too late, right? And assuming that you have prepared, assuming that you have put in some good quality practice, and there's and that's a whole separate topic. There's things that you can do to sort of make it easier for yourself. There are certain physiological things, for example, like I said about the symptoms, there are certain physiological things that people tend to do when they're stressing out, that if you're aware of them, you can, I don't know, like I don't mean sort of manage it and sort of try and force yourself to physically be in a different way, because that's not going to really help. But just knowing, particularly breathing, particularly breathing, is a very it's a good kind of barometer of where things are at. And when people, and I find it in coaching sessions as well, actually, it's not just in performances, that when I talk about a challenging belief or difficult experience with people, they'll hold their breath. Or when they, we've got a difficult passage when they're playing, they'll often hold their breath. And sort of, there's a lot to be said for being physically, let's say physically aware. I don't want to say make sure that you're breathing well. I don't want to sort of give you sort of more to do on the stage, because that's really, by the time you started to think, oh, I should, why is this going so bad? It's already starting to spin, and we don't want to sort of spin it further by giving more. But I've found that periodically, a little voice in my head will go, how are you breathing at the moment? And that can often be it can be a helpful kind of tool if you want to, I'm not a big fan of tools, but particularly the breathing thing seems to, it's like when in a yoga class and a yoga teacher says, keep breathing through the difficult postures. It's the same kind of thing, is that, if we feel really safe, then we tend to keep breathing. And when at a deep level we don't feel so safe, we don't breathe. So breathing can be helpful. I mean, I'd also say, if you're on the stage, and like I said, by that point it's kind of too late. All you can really do is surrender to the moment. All you can really do is surrender to your training, surrender to the audience, surrender to the music, dissolve yourself into the music, actually. So because then as that happens, and when I said about resistance, to the moment, what that really means is making it about me, making it about the character that's making the music, the musician. It's not really about the musician at all. It's about this creative energy. It might sound a bit sort of hippie and stuff, but it's the less that someone's aware of the character that's making the music, and whether they're looking good at the piano or whether they're looking professional enough, whatever, they're kind of getting closer to that kind of experience that people describe as flow, where the sense of self dissolves and like the self is transcended. So anything that you can do to sort of look in the direction of just the pure energy of the pure moment, and of breath flowing, all of those, that's the direction that people head in when they are I don't know, in a better kind of space. So it's helpful to know that happens. That's what I've found, and obviously, if you've historically been practicing a passage and you've always played it badly and it's going to come out badly, that's not a mindset thing. That's part of the training. So that's a separate kind of issue.
So tell me if you don't mind. You said it's too late, and I kind of agree with it. When does it start? Does it start? Is there a time frame? Let's say, okay, I should try and work on this a week before, a month before. Does it start the minute you play the new piece? What are your thoughts?
Talking specifically about feeling confident
preparation
with
yes, you mentioned, so when you are on the stage, it's almost too late to do something about these nerves. And of course you mentioned the preparation, so I'm trying to pin down the moment when is a good start. And of course it's a little bit simplistic, but maybe there is a point of when you can prepare yourself. Let's say you have a big concert or exam coming up, let's say in a month. Is it enough time?
I suppose what I mean about the being too late, I was kind of being a bit flippant. You can hold it together. You can hold it together on the stage. What I mean is that like the understanding that I talk about in the book and the understanding that I teach the clients essentially is that feelings and thoughts are a creation by us. They're not something that happens to us from the environment or from the piece. And most of us kind of get that to a point. But the thing that I say in the book that was really a game changer for me was that it's not a sort of 80% internal, 20% external. It's 100% created. You know, my experience of nerves, or my experience of the story, like whether I'm good enough or whether I'm confident enough or whether I was well trained enough or whether I went to the right music college or whether my parents were musical enough, or all that stuff, all of that is my creation, right? And the more that that's seen as an internal job rather than an external thing that happens to me, once a musician has that kind of understanding that that's where it's coming from, that's the thing. It's their understanding of how their psychology works rather than a specific tool to try and get a particular kind of mindset. So if they've really got that, and people have got that from reading the book, or they've got that from having a couple of conversations with me or whatever, or just having insights, you know, with nothing to do with me, you know, but I would say it's their level of understanding of how their psychology works that's going to be the thing that's going to make the difference, you know. So because if someone's on stage and they are feeling nervous and they're trying to maintain a state or trying to think clear thoughts, if they're trying to sort of stir up, you know, an analogy I often use is like if you wanted, if I had a glass of crystal clear water and I had some mud and I put some mud in it, then if I stirred the water, the water would get muddy and it would get kind of brown and you wouldn't be able to see through it. But if I wanted to clear that water, the only thing that I could do to really speed up the process of clearing it would be to completely leave it alone. And as that would happen, the mud would settle to the bottom and the water would be clear again. But you know, if someone fundamentally, you know, if they had a misunderstanding about how muddy water worked, and they were trying to stir, I want to get it clear, I'm going to stir it clear. Then, and that's what performers do all the time. It's like, I want to be confident, I've got to be confident, I've got to feel better. And actually, it's that mental stirring that's causing the muddy water, you know. And what they, as soon as they have an understanding of that mentally they can leave it alone, then that's the thing. You know, and that someone can get that in an instant. So in terms of a time frame, it's to do with someone's own understanding or their own exploration of that stuff. But that's kind of a personal sort of, I don't know, almost like a spiritual journey that they need to go on. It's kind of, they need to sort of commit to this sort of internal component of the music making beyond the notes and beyond the you know, the external hard skills. It's more of a soft skill. It's more of a you know, relationship with the mind, you know.
It's sort of trying to get I mean, I'm not an expert in these words, and forgive me if I use it incorrectly, I know they're quite specific, but it's almost like being in a sort of a meditation moment where you accept all that's going on and not trying to fight it, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of similarity, and I think the distinction that I would draw is between the act of meditating versus the state of meditation. You know, so what we're after is well, I guess what we're interested in, should I say, is the state of meditation, and that's not something that you can get. That's something that you are. You know, it's not, you don't get, you know, like the muddy water. The water essentially, by its nature, is clear. It's essentially clear, and understanding the water's nature is what causes someone to relate to the water in a different way and allow it to clear when it's left alone. And it doesn't make sense to someone to stir it because they understand how the water works. And it's the same, you know, it's a self-meditating mind. It doesn't need an act, and it can be a useful experiment to do, and we can go to meditation classes. But if you're anything like me, I've been to classes where I've entered, or I've kind of experienced what feels like a meditative state, and I've also had very, very busy, like I can't calm my mind down type experiences. And it's not I haven't succeeded or failed at meditating. It's just that different weather has occurred in different times. It's no one's fault. It's not because I didn't practice the technique correctly. It's just because that was how it happened to be, you know.
Mm-hmm. So basically, I'm sorry, I'm a sort of a very sort of points-based person. I always want to kind of get practical.
Absolutely.
You know, and some people say it's because I'm a Virgo, but I don't believe it. but I sort of I love what you say, and I'm just trying to, for myself, and I'm being a bit selfish here, saying
be selfish. It's fine.
There are different people and with different mindsets. And let's say if my mindset is a busy mindset, you know, like active and all the time kind of a bit wound up, I should not force myself into like complete zone because it's just not the way my mindset works. Is that what you're saying? Or
I'm gonna maybe hammer this metaphor a little bit too hard, but stay with me. So what I'm saying is, it's not, if I take a glass of water, then that water works a certain way. Now, that's not the way that water works is not the only way that it's not the way that glass of water on its own works. It's the way that every glass of water works. It's universal because water works a certain way. And what I'm saying is that, you know, we're often trained to think in terms of personalities and people's differences, and you know, gender differences, or geographical differences, or age differences. And what I'm saying is that I understand what that stuff means, but that's kind of surface level stuff. I'm talking about something way more fundamental about all human minds. That they share something in common, which is that they are self-clearing by their nature. All human minds, and obviously people are at different places. They you know, it's like the mental health discussion. Actually, it's not that mental health. You know, when we're talking about mental health, it's not that something is so much broken, or, you know, if someone's having a difficult, you know, like panic attacks or performance anxiety, or you know, serious problems with those, and they're stopping them from performing. It's not that something is broken. It's just that it's a particular state of affairs that things are currently in. It's the place that they're at. It's not their essential nature. So I don't see anybody as being a person who has a busy mindset. I see you know, a glass of water that happens to be being stirred a lot. That's okay, because when I stir, you know, when I get very thinky, I feel very busy. That's what everybody does. That's the same for everybody. And you know, the conversation I might have with someone who's in a sort of very sort of het up state, it might be a different conversation to somebody else, but essentially we're talking about what the water does. And the water does the same thing for everybody, which is, you know, it can be cloudy, it can be clear, but there's nothing broken about the water being, you know, busy or being stirred. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, you know, if you don't realize that it can be clear, it can feel a bit weird to allow it to do that. You know, it can feel wrong, actually. You know, so sometimes I've spoken to, you know, I've with clients, sometimes people have said, well, I'm not worrying enough. I don't feel like I'm worrying enough. I should be you know, and it's learning that. And I'm not saying be negligent, and I'm not saying, you know, don't do your due diligence when it comes to practice and preparing and making sure that you've, you know, got the right dress for the performance and you know, and book the hair appointment, all that kind of stuff. You know, we want to make sure that all It's not, it's beyond, it's beyond that. You know, we're talking about that you don't need to think your way through life, full stop. That's, we somehow, you know, we were never actually told that by teachers, but we're often told things like concentrate, you know, don't you care, what, you know, why haven't you done this, you know, and as if we're meant to be thinking our way through life. And for most people, they only experience the mind sort of clearing, sort of quietening down by accident, sort of very rarely, because, you know, when they're having a shower, or when they're going for a walk or something, and they don't realize that that's not a special feature of going on holiday or going for a walk. That's the essential nature of the mind, is it can quieten down by itself, but it involves you have to take your hands off the steering wheel, sort of thing. You've got to, you know, like when I said about sort of surrendering to the moment in the performance, it's the same thing. It's allowing the mind to be average, actually, which is one of the things I say in the book, is just allow yourself to be average psychologically. You know, we spend so much time wanting to be exceptional performers, and to stand out as being different.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's the pressure that you need to do it right now and do it your best way. And actually, I think that if there's a case of what happens, and of course, I think we kind of performers tend to magnify things so much, you know. Oh, one wrong note, but I mean, no one cares.
And the voice of your teachers from generations come back and say, you should have done this, you should have been better, you know, you should know better than this, who do you think you are, you know, all that stuff.
It was extraordinary. So from my conversations with let's say Peter Donahoe or Stephen Osborne, who have been a lot on the journey, the only thing they say, which really stands out, is well, just tell us a story. You know, we don't care about any notes, or just kind of, you know, let us into your inner world. And of course, you know, especially with competitions. So maybe we can talk about this, you know, competitiveness and competitions. I know you discuss it a lot, so let's elaborate on that.
So competitions, I
think competitions or exams are something where, you know, you will be judged. How can you prepare your mind that, you know, just let go? Or because it's, I think one is a performance for people, live concert, even a recording. I somehow think they're not as stressful as competitions or exams.
Well, to be controversial, I suppose, you know, if what I've said is true about the glass of water sort of calming down by itself, and if what I've said is true about our feelings not coming from external events, but it's an internal creation, then it's not really true that a competition is inherently a stressful thing. Now, I know that people might listen to that and go, "Are you kidding me? This is an international. This is the Tchaikovsky concerto, you know, or whatever it is." You know, I understand the kind of thinking that people have about it. I understand the kind of experience that they have, that they create. But there's nothing inherent in the actual competition itself that means that it's essential that everybody will always feel stressed out under pressure. That's just not true, because if that were true, then everybody's experience would all be the same kind of thing. There would never be moments when you know, someone would feel more comfortable on stage. You know, why is it possible that certain performers can have moments where they're very comfortable on stage in the course of a competition? Or why is it that the same performer can have a varying experience in this high pressure environment? It's not the environment. It's not the environment. Now, is that to say that there aren't certain things that would be wise to do if you're preparing for an international competition. No, because you clearly you need there's a degree of, you obviously have to know the kinds of things that the jury are likely to like. You obviously need to be prepared sort of from a technical standpoint, and you need to have the kind that experience of performing and all those. You need to be a musician that can sort of come up with the goods from a sort of purely mechanical perspective. But if we're talking about the inner component here, then it's no different to anything. It's no different to the toothbrushing. Mm-hmm. It's essentially the degree to which you can, whether you call it telling a story or whether you call it sort of surrendering to the moment, the more that, and this is what I'm saying, if someone genuinely knows, I don't just mean like intellectually, but they know it in an embodied way, that they are okay no matter what kind of emotions come up for them, then they can have a momentary sort of feeling of pressure, but they don't feel the need to do anything about it per se, and so they then go on stage, they just play, they've prepared, and it doesn't, it needn't feel massively different from them playing in a recital in a church or something, or and if it does feel intensely pressurized, then they can be okay in that feeling too. Mm-hmm. They don't need to do a special mindset for a performance or a special mindset for a competition. Mm-hmm. It's not the answer we want to hear, because we want to hear the ninja techniques.
No, I think you're right. I think you're reshaping also my thoughts, because I'm always the person, I'm sure as many are, I think in the society we have a problem, and we Google, at least at the first, instance, how to fix it, mm-hmm. And of course what you want to have is a list. Number one, you need to do this. Number two, and of course it doesn't work like that. So I think what you're saying, that we need to kind of dig deeper and stop treating this as something special, but just kind of, maybe I hope I understand you correctly, but understanding this of the part of our life's experiences, and accepting that this is different from practice, but it's still an experience, as you mentioned, going for a walk or going to a shop. So, and stop winding ourselves up about it.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be a big deal. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It's okay if we are unfazed by it. Now, I'm not saying that people should be, in order to succeed, they should be relaxed or they should be confident, because I'm not talking about having a particular destination state. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because it's like, you could also, to use another analogy, it's like, if I look out my window right now, I can see some cloud cover. I'm not sort of running around in circles going, oh, there should be a blue sky, it should be blue, and this is wrong, and I need to, how can I sort of intervene? I can see the clouds, they're sort of gently moving, and some of them are a bit more grey than others. God bless the British weather. But I know that the nature of how that stuff works is it comes and goes, and it doesn't. None of them are better or worse. For inherently, sunny weather is I might react. I might find myself doing different things mm-hmm. in mm-hmm. the rain. I might choose to put my coat on, or I might choose to go and dance in the rain, or I might choose to stay inside. It's not that any weather is necessarily better or worse, or the perfect weather. We kind of talk as if it is sometimes, but the way that it's useful because it changes, and it's the same with the internal weather. Internal weather comes and goes, and if I'm not really thinking too much about my state of mind when I'm on stage, it's kind of cool. I don't really need to do very much. If I suddenly find that I'm very nervous and feel under pressure, I might find myself taking a couple of deep breaths, but it's not a prescription per se that I have to do. It's just, in that particular moment, it made sense to take a couple of deep breaths. I might find I'm feeling a bit het up on stage, and it makes sense for me to just take a moment and pause, or just, what's it going to sound like, or feel into it, or in a particular way. But it's not a specific prescription that I need to follow. It comes as a response to the moment because I'm aware of the moment, so it's not so much a case of we needn't make such a big deal of it being a performance or a competition, and I know that career-wise it can be a big deal. Career-wise, yes. Or if I want to write a nice biography of myself and it says first place rather than second place, that's nice from that perspective. But that's not who I am. That's not my psychological experience, and they're two different things. If people are clear on that, they can sort of detach from the outcome a little and
Mm-hmm.
and be in the moment and play. And ironically, it's almost like, at a certain level, the less you care about it, the better you're going to do.
Yes, I totally.
That's what I found.
I totally. And could we touch a little bit, sort of topic of competitiveness,
Mm-hmm.
amongst, let's say, pianists and any musicians really in schools, let's say, where your it doesn't matter which age you are, sort of, someone is doing better, and someone is doing this, and yeah, any thoughts?
Competitiveness. Well, I mean, what I would say is that I've experienced this myself as a music student, and I've also done some work with conservatoire students. I did a project at Trinity Laban a little while ago, and the first thing I'd say is that there's an innocent intention, and there's a very good intention behind why someone would feel competitive, because they want to achieve something fantastic. They have this desire to fully kind of actualize themselves, or to do the most that they can in their life, and to make a difference and connect with people through music, or to prove something about themselves, and I guess that's sort of admirable, I guess. The thing that I've noticed, I guess, about I'm particularly thinking about conservatoire students, is that they can spend so much time trying to be the best, or trying to compete, or trying to prove something, or trying to impress a teacher who they also compete with, or want the approval of, that somewhere along the line they sort of identify with that struggle. They equate their self-esteem with how well they're doing, how much applause they're getting, how many marks they're getting. For me, I don't know how long ago it was, but 2001, 2002, it was like, if I had a shoulder injury, if I could play for 3 hours that day, I was a better musician than if I was in severe pain and couldn't play at all. And so my self-esteem, the story I would create for myself, was that I was more valuable if I could play more, or I was more valuable if I could play a certain piece of music. And this is, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because people are so passionate about their music, and they have such a strong emotional desire that they have this ability to throw themselves into their studies, but they then think that their well-being depends on their success or failure, and that's also something that's playing into, you know, those high pressure situations when they feel that, you know, if they come first place, or if they are confident, then that means that they're a more meaningful human being, and knowing that there is, well, there's, this may sound strange, but there's nothing that you can do, there's nothing you can possibly do that can make you a more valuable human being. You already have all the value you could possibly need. You know, you already are valuable. You know, a valuable expression. You're already achieving your fullest potential in this moment. That's not to say that you might not want to do things differently in future and sort of continue your career in a different way, but to people tell themselves a story of, you know, I am okay when, and I'm not okay when this happens, and that's it's a misunderstanding. We can be a lot as professional musicians, we can be a lot kinder to ourselves than that. And from what I can tell, that the musicians who are the happiest are the ones who don't identify as, you know, my whole life is musician, you know, my whole life is my music career. They are in touch with, they know that they are a husband, a wife, someone who likes to go for a walk, someone who likes to have a nice glass of wine, or, you know,
Nick, I must tell you, you're repeating the words of Marc-André Amelin, which I've interviewed, and this is exactly what he says. Like, stay away from the piano and get these life experiences into your music, because that's what makes your music actually interesting, fun.
Fall in love with being average. That's what I think. You know, you can be average and still be special.
Nick, one last question, actually.
Sure.
Fascinating discussion. So, you know, and let's take someone who is a little younger and shows a lot of talent, you know, maybe in their teenage years, maybe even younger. And they clearly have talent, musical abilities, but they just don't like to practice. I know it's a tough question. Do we need to force this, you know, children, teenagers, you know, I don't know, even sometimes students to practice harder, or is it just entirely their choice? And if it happens, then it happens.
Well, it is their choice. And like any other musician, so an older musician, their ability to make a good choice depends on how well they understand what's going on. You know, so like, for example, I mean, I don't do much teaching now. It's mostly coaching with musicians, but I have kept on one student, and one thing, and she's 8 years old, and one thing I notice about this student is that, you know, when I first started working with her, it was like, you know, when I feel inspired to practice, I'll practice. When I don't feel inspired to practice, I won't. Or when I feel bored, that's a sign that I should stop. Or if I feel angry with the way that this passage is going, that means I'm no good at it, so I've got to give up. And I guess the teacher's job, and the journey that the teacher's job is to help them to sort of navigate that, the emotional weather in the same way. It's like, it's okay, I get angry sometimes too, but let's play it again anyway. You know, it doesn't, everyone gets angry with, you know, feeling frustrated. How can we approach it from a different angle? Or, you know, and they need to know what happens if you come to a lesson and you haven't prepared, and obviously you won't be able to play it. They need to kind of understand the sort of life cycle, the practice cycle. It's not just one emotion. You know, it's like, I feel happy, therefore my music is all perfect, or I'm feeling inspired, therefore I'm a good musician. It ebbs and flows. There's a sort of seasonality to the way that we feel. So the best thing I can say is really that you know they need a teacher who will sort of gently show them how to weather the storm, rather than, you know, because it's not helpful for anyone to be sort of forced to do things if they don't feel like they've done it. You want them to sort of feel like it's their idea, but you don't want to sort of sugarcoat it. You know, sometimes it doesn't feel nice to practice. It doesn't feel, you don't need to feel motivated to brush your teeth. You know, I say that to kids. You know, you don't need to feel motivated to practice. You don't need to feel inspired to play. Just, you know, if you're serious about getting your grade 5 or your grade 8 or your diploma, then you keep playing, you keep getting better, and you practice whether you feel you need to or not. You just keep going. And that's how that to me is what discipline is. It's, you know, it's just remembering what you want. I want to get better. You know, this girl has said to me she wants to get grade 8 one day. It's like, okay, cool. So there's a bunch of things you're going to have to do to get grade 8. So, you know, you just remember what you want and keep going, you know.
Yeah, I think it's a good motto in life. Yeah, keep remembering what you want and keep going. I think that's brilliant. Well, Nick, thank you so much. It's been delightful. Lots of interesting topics we've covered and interesting ideas. Wonderful. And thank you very
My
much.
pleasure.
Have a lovely day.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
You
Bye.
too. Thanks a lot. Bye.